I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Sarah Farmer, and we're going to be talking about her book, Leader Unleashed. Become one of the most highly valued members of the executive team in your first 90 days.
Nice
Sarah,
short
thank
title.
you so much for coming on. Where can people find you?
So people can find me. I hang out a lot on LinkedIn. It's my second home. So I'm on LinkedIn, Sarah Farmer, executive coach. My website, which is about to be under a lot of change, but you can find me there anyway, which is emr-consulting.co.uk.
And so I've read your book. It's a really good book. Really enjoyed it. What was the inspiration for it? Because there's a number of themes that come out in it, isn't there?
Yeah. So the biggest inspiration was that a lot of the clients I was working with when I started writing this, we were just hitting COVID. And all these clients, these senior leaders and midline level leaders were full of confidence before that. And then people were starting to lose their jobs and they really lost their way. They lost their mojo. And it was very clear that they were struggling with their self-belief and everything else. And imposter syndrome was coming up a lot. I've got a real vested interest in imposter syndrome because it's something I struggled with all my life. And with everything I'd learned over the years and the stuff I was doing to help people, it became very clear that I could adapt what I was doing to specifically help people with imposter syndrome, who were, at that time, my clients returning to work after time out. So the book is very much about emotional, social intelligence, actually. It's about developing confidence and some, but it's written for leaders returning to work who often feel, even if they've only been out for a couple of weeks or more, that they've forgotten everything. And were they any good? And they haven't had an interview for 20 years. What if they can't interview? All of that stuff was going on. So yeah, that's where the inspiration came from.
So talk to us a little bit about imposter syndrome, what it is, why we get it, and the impact that it makes on us.
Okay, I mean it's a huge question, so I'll try and distill it down because we've got
well you cover it in about 50 pages. So
there's a lot in there. So imposter syndrome is not a simple, am I good enough? I've started a new job, I feel a bit uncomfortable. That's not it. It's a constant, repetitive fear of not being good enough, feeling like a fraud. Procrastination is a big sign of it. The need to have things perfect before you send them out. But it's not necessarily one of those things alone. What I do is I look at you as a whole. And if there are more signs and symptoms that say this is imposter syndrome, then it's worth looking at and dealing with. But people are confusing imposter syndrome with just a normal level of trepidation.
Yeah.
And it's really annoying me because it's confusing people, and people who've got proper imposter syndrome thinking, well, I should just be able to click my fingers, count back from 5 and snap out of it, and then wondering why they can't and feeling really stupid. So if you can't do that and it's consistent, then it's probably worth doing something about it. It can be acute, so it can happen as a result of something. You may never have felt it before. For a lot of my clients, they've had it for a very prolonged period of time. And the problems with it is that it either slows us down or it stops us in our tracks from doing the things, getting the things that we want. And the reason for that is because it renders us less attractive, less magnetic to attract the things that we want in life, because we're giving off a fear. They'll pick it up in their brains. Person opposite me will pick it up, but they won't go, oh, I wonder if they've got imposter syndrome. Let's calm this person down and make them feel comfortable. They just go, oh, you've scared me because you're scared. I don't want to work with you. I don't want to buy you. I don't want to employ you. And that causes a big problem, a really big problem.
Because I think that, because quite often I agree with you with the imposter syndrome, like I've got to speak in front of 200 people. That's really scary.
Yes.
But that's normal.
Yes.
Being a human.
Yes, absolutely. This is what drives me potty about it, is that's really normal. And if you didn't feel that, I'd say you've probably got another problem. Calming yourself, you can use the tools that I talk about in the Eagle program to calm yourself down, to calm that negative self-talk. But you cannot say just in that one-off event, that means I have imposter syndrome. In my mind.
We'll come on to the Eagle system in a moment.
Yeah.
Talk to me about so you on in the back of the book you also sort of say successfully dial down the negative chatter.
Yeah.
Talk us about talk us to about that.
So people with imposter syndrome have this consistent negative dialogue going on, and it happens way more than they realize. A lot of our thinking is unconscious or subconscious. In fact, 95% of it is. So they don't even realize that they're doing it. It's become so ingrained in what they do. So little things like you'll get to a meeting and they'll say, "Oh, Tim, time for you to speak up." And Tim suddenly goes, "I can't speak." But all the time you're thinking, "I'm going to have to speak. I'm going to have to speak," and that will be worrying you. Not just that on its own, but there'll be other stuff going on. So dialing down this negative self-talk is the absolute only way to reprogram your brain so that you can stop flooding your body with the fear and all the chemicals that go with that stop you shining brightly and being the person that you can be when you're needed to be it, in an interview, in a board meeting, in a conversation, wherever.
Because there's only so much energy that we can have in our heads, isn't it? And if we're talking to ourselves negatively, then and of course what happens is that reception is reality, isn't it? That if we feel that something is negative, we'll go into a situation negatively.
Yeah, and this is what really shocks my clients is this is brilliant news. If you can think negatively and create your negative outcome, that means you are just as able to think positively and create your positive outcome. But it takes more energy to do that because we're hardwired to look for fear and threat because that's the way our brains work.
Yeah.
So when they get that, they're like, "Oh my gosh, so I can switch it and I can do the other thing." That is so empowering. And there's this thing called the reticular activating system, the RAS. If someone says to you, "What car do you want to buy?" "I'm buying a new car." And you go, "I want a red car. I want an Audi." Guess what you see on the road constantly? Red Audi, because you've triggered your brain to look for it. So when we're telling our brains we're rubbish, we shouldn't speak up, we're not going to get the job, we're going to get sacked, we are telling our brain that's where to go and what to look for. And so we'll do everything we can to make that our reality, which is bonkers. But it's what we do, and we can do the opposite as well.
So you mentioned about neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
And brain wiring. So talk to us about that.
So neuroplasticity is all about our ability to rewire our brain. As when we're very young, our brains are much more malleable, bendable, if you like, and we're able to learn and believe new stuff more easily because we haven't laid down our hardwired supercomputer of information of how the world should be. So, but as we get older, we're so entrenched in our own beliefs. What we believe is true. And it's very hard for us to change our beliefs because we've done this thing over and over again. The way I describe it is, if you think about you're driving down a motorway. So this is the way I've always done something. I drive down the motorway this way. And then I say to you at the end of the motorway, right, instead of turning left, motorway is a bad idea because you can't turn left or right, but just go with me. Say you're turning left, which is where you'd always go. I'm now going to ask you to turn right. That road isn't built yet. So neuroplasticity is about creating new neurological pathways between where you are now and where you want to be. And that requires energy, repetition, more energy and more repetition. And that's why people often fail from doing the new stuff because they keep going, "I'm at that precipice. That way's really easy." And your brain's going, "Don't waste energy building a new motorway. Let's do this one." So, which is why working with a coach or a mentor or a friend or someone is so helpful to keep you accountable and keep you going, because it's very hard to rewire your brain on your own.
Because we have a reluctance to change, don't we? We don't like change because actually the brain knows that it's going to be hard work, and we wasn't it Bill Gates that said if you want a simple process, ask a lazy person.
Yeah. It's really hard. We've got, our brains are working on really old software. They could do the massive reboot. The way our brains were made in Neanderthal man and woman days were there just to protect us from harm. So we didn't have a rational brain then. Well, maybe we did, but it wasn't functioning because it didn't need to. So this emotional brain, this emotional center, the limbic center, is so powerful, and it's built to recognize threat. But what it doesn't do, because it's working on an old OS system, is recognize that walking across a road when there's a lorry coming towards you is not the same as moving your desk from one side of an office to another. And it can be that simple to set off a threat response in someone, asking them to move desks. It's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
So let's talk about your Eagle system. So so Eagle is evaluate, analyze, generate, learn, and evolve. Do you want to step us through those 5 steps?
Yeah. So the evaluate. So what I found was that you can't just snap your fingers when you've got imposter syndrome. All right. You can't just choose positive self-talk. So to create long-lasting behavior change, I knew that there was more to be done. So what we do is in the first stage with evaluate is look at what are you doing, when are you doing it, how are you doing it, and why. And until you see the reality of it and start to think, well, this is all a bit bonkers, why would you change? What we're trying to do here is give your brain a really good reason to change. So that's quite a lot of deep work. It can be quite intense. But unlike counseling or psychotherapy, we don't spend hours looking at, where does it all come from? We do look at that. We do look at where's it come from. But then we look at what you want instead pretty quickly. All right. So the first step is to evaluate. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And is that's an irrational conversation about using logic and
Total logic.
I do need to go to the gym because I need to lose weight and I need to get fit.
Yeah, it's total logic. What are you doing? Well, I wanted to go to the gym. Why didn't you? I decided to eat chocolate instead.
Yeah.
Why did you do that? Well, because. So we look at what people are doing and why, and that is it's a very interesting piece of work. I'm always fascinated. Some of the stories I hear here in this bit are so upsetting what people have been through, and they've never connected what happened to them in their childhood. And it's not always something that's happened to them in childhood, by the way. Sometimes it's more recent, but often they've not joined that dot from childhood to, God, I'm behaving like this now because of that, and I'm allowing this thing to hold me back. And that can be quite thrilling, actually, for people that they've actually figured out what it is. So we find that a lot in evaluate. Analyze, we go a bit deeper. I don't stop there because I could just go to snapping my fingers and going, right, we've sussed it, right? No, we've got to go a bit further. They've got to feel the pain a little bit more, unfortunately, which is, how is it actually impacting you? And I look at, how is it impacting you mentally, physically, and financially? When people see the effect it's having on them in those 3 areas, on them first, that's an eye-opener. Then what we do is expand out the ripple. Who else is it affecting? That's usually the thing that makes people go, right, that's it. I've got to change this. Either it's their family, it's their friends, it's their team. A lot of leaders go, whoa, I had no idea this was impacting my team and their results, and then the company, and then the client. I mean, that ripple just goes. So that really blows up people's minds. Then they get a choice. Do I want to do something about it or not? Everyone says yes at this point because they've just had enough. And then we go into generate, where the fun starts to happen. Right. So we've looked at the old motorway and gone, I don't like the old motorway anymore. And now I'm prepared and ready to create the new motorway. Generate is about looking at what you want instead. We look at what's in the future for you. What does the future hold? And for you to achieve that, my favorite question is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I don't care how old my clients are. There's always something else they want to do. What's stopping them? What would they need to be thinking, feeling, believing, doing to get there? And then we distill that down into what I call a mantra. So every time we have this negative narrative, we have to notice it, recognize it, which we'll do because we've recognized it in evaluate and analyze, and put in the new mantra. So that's like a trip hazard to go, right, stop, here's the new thing we're going to say. And if I'm saying to myself, I'm great, I've got this is going to be amazing, I cannot be thinking, this is going to fail, I'm going to be rubbish, and I'm going to faint. I can't be doing the 2 things at the same time.
Yep.
So we're rewiring the brain at this point. And I get people to do that, I call it for fun, to practice in real life when they need to, and any opportunity they can, and practice, so that the brain starts to be rewired. And it becomes just as easy to drive down that motorway as it does the old one. All right. To do that, though, we need to go into learn, which is where we go into practice, planning, reward, recognition. I'm asking them for feedback. They're feeding back on themselves. We're learning self-coaching here. There's a lot going on because generators like, I've got it. Go and do it now in Learn. Go and do it. And go and do it on purpose. Then they start to see the reward, how that feels. And that really reminds them to keep going and keep growing.
And when you mean reward, talk to me about the reward part of it.
So the reward part is, say, for example, someone has had a real problem relationship with someone else in their team and they've stayed quiet and they've sat and they've mulled over it and they've never said anything, never stood up for themselves. And then they do, because they've got this ability now to say something in an emotionally intelligent way, and they get the desired result. That's almost like winning the lottery for some people. And we get them to notice, what did they do? What happened as a result? And how does that feel? And what does that make you think? And that gives them that continual impetus to keep going and trying and learning. One of my clients came to me a couple of weeks ago and she said, I feel like a warrior woman. So I've gone from being this like person who just irritates and feels irritated and feels frustrated to a warrior. And she's like full of energy and coping better and dealing with things. And it's, yeah. So that's the learn bit. And then the evolve is, in a non-egotistical way, sharing your confidence and your value with other people when they need to know it.
Right. So talk us through that.
So this is, so people go, oh, I don't want to show off. This isn't about showing off. This is about, say, for example, you are a consultant and you're working for an organization that pays you X. You know it's not enough, but you haven't built up your value with them yet. When I get my clients to help their clients see the value that they've added to the organization, their why, their purpose, their impact, they can then start to be more valuable. This is where in the book I talk about become the most valuable member of the leadership team, the executive team. Yeah. Is once you can do that, people don't want to let you go. Too many people are either showing off, which is not the right way to do it, that just repels anyway, or gets people promoted, but that's a whole different story. Or they're hiding their light. And so they're like, why didn't I get the promotion? Why didn't I get the appraisal result I wanted? Where are you continually taking that person's brain to remind them how brilliant you are? And people aren't doing that because it's uncomfortable. You know, it's not a British thing to do, is it? So they learn a way to communicate that is emotionally intelligent, professional, makes them feel valued whilst proving their value to others. And that's when you see people getting the jobs, getting the promotions, getting the salary rises, on and on and on.
And I think that's, and I agree with you that it's not about showing off or saying, aren't I great? It's about, you know, what everybody wants within a leadership team is for people to contribute, and it's showing that you're actually making that contribution, because quite often it's they're sitting back and they're not sharing what they need to share.
They're not. And this is when you look at the ripple effect again, is if I'm sitting back and not saying I've had a really good idea, who knows what that contribution could have done for my team, for my organization, for my clients. I actually think it's quite rude. I have a bit of a joke with them going, it's a bit rude not to share, isn't it? Because you never know. But if the culture of the organization has made them feel so uncomfortable that they can't show up and speak up, it's a problem. So although this program is written for people with imposter syndrome, it is adapted in everything that I do to help people become better leaders, irrespective of their level of confidence, because it helps them understand themselves, why they do what they do, and show up as better, more bright and brilliant leaders.
And I guess this also, the ecosystem now allows people to become more mentally resilient.
Hugely, hugely. That's what it's all about. Confidence, resilience, more confidence, more resilience, self-awareness, massive amount of self-awareness, and emotional self-control. So all that lovely EI instead of IQ is in there, which is what the leaders of today need.
And of course, what we're doing is, if we're doing that in the business world, we're probably doing it in our personal lives as well.
It doesn't, yeah. And the results that I see, I mean, I've written about these on LinkedIn, but things from, people losing weight to their golf swing getting better to getting married, never had a long-standing relationship before. Oh, and making 20 million on top of the business. And, it's like everything. We are one person. If we're working on this and this is better, everything gets better. Everything.
Sarah, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a fantastic conversation. Where can we get a copy of this?
So it's on Amazon and all other good bookstores. Amazon's probably the easiest. So yeah, go and check it out. And I'd love to hear people's thoughts on it as well once they've read it.
And where can we find you?
So me, again, I'm on LinkedIn always. So Sarah Farmer, Executive Coach. You should be able to find me quite easily. And my website, which is emr-consulting.co.uk.
Thank you so much for coming on and talking.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Great book. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And